All right. So for my example, I did, Kevin is an auditor hired by a large accounting firm. While auditing, he found some discrepancies in the firm's books. He knows that if he doesn't give a favorable audit, the company will fire him and he'll lose a portion of his income. And then I thought this is an example of what? Attachment, feedback, that's the correct answer. Ambiguity, feedback, although Kevin could look the other way, it's not letting his bias interpret the data the wrong way, so it's not correct. Familiarity, feedback. This is not familiarity because Kevin does not know them. And then approval, feedback. This is not approval because Kevin did his own audit, not other people's work.
Okay, we don't have to do a question this week, though.
Okay.
So, but good job, Alex. So I did mine. I'm a gymnastics judge, and so I talked about how even gymnastics judging is very subjective for the most part, but even on the pretty straightforward deductions, like a step on the landing, or there's we have several options. One step on the landing, one large step on the landing, a very small step on the landing, a controlled lunge, which is no deduction. And so the ambiguity of, not having a cut and dried deduction, even when you say, well, was that a large step, a small step, or a controlled step on the landing? I can't remember the word. Let's see. Let me go back and look. Was an A word. Anybody help me with that word?
Sorry.
So anyway, just when you don't have specific guidelines of
like ambiguity,
ambiguity. Yeah. Was that one of the words that they said we could use?
Yeah.
Okay, then ambiguity was the word.
Mm-hmm.
What was yours, Valerie?
Mine was an example of familiarity, where like hiring managers tend to hire people they know versus people they don't. You've heard the saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. This is oftentimes true, and that's why a lot of times on applications, they'll ask if you know or you're related to anyone that works for the company. And they also don't let those related direct report to each other either because of that.
Right.
So that was my example.
Cool.
So I guess from here on out, we're just supposed to talk about how, yes, ambiguous, that was the word. We're just supposed to talk about other stuff in the article and how big of a bias of an issue is bias in everyday ethical situations. And then we just have to write a paragraph or two. One of us has to write a paragraph or two and turn it in. So one of the questions it wanted us to talk about was the title of this unit is ethics, but according to the article you just read, at least in the case of auditors, teaching auditors about ethics will not have an impact on bias. The authors suggest education that helps auditors understand the unconscious errors they make and the reasons they make them. For business students and others who will not be auditors, what kind of education, if any, would help future business professionals avoid bias? Is it pointless?
So I think, do you guys want to go through all these questions or just want to pick a couple? And
yeah, let's just pick a couple and see,
so we do the last one, Mike. Why is it so difficult to overcome bias even when you know about it? That one would be a pretty easy one to knock out.
Well, I think even in everyday life, our biases kind of even though we attempt to we try not to be biased,
right?
We still wind up, like, for one example, I had to judge my daughters in gymnastics when they were competing, and I knew that people would think that I would go high on them because they were my daughters. And so I intentionally would, make sure that I wrote down the things that I saw that they were doing wrong. But in doing that, I didn't take into account the fact that I knew in particular what they did wrong. And so it was easier for me to see that. And so I would always have meet referees who are like the head judge. They would come over and stand by me for a little while just to make sure that they knew where I had been on the rest of the kids. And, they would consistently tell me, you need to come up a couple tenths, Denise, you were too hard on them. And that's not fair. And so I think sometimes, even when we're aware of our biases, sometimes it makes us go the other direction, kind of like affirmative action, an affirmative action type thing. If we know we're going to be ultra hard on somebody, then we try to go the other way and wind up sometimes being too soft on them.
I agree. I think it's really hard to overcome our biases because, all of us have different backgrounds and knowledge, and we use those when we make our judgments. I mean, even though that we want to be fair when we're judging something, I think it still affects us. And like you, Denise, you were probably harder on your own girls because you didn't want to come across as biased.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, if you go back to the scriptures, there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, we shouldn't judge, we shouldn't judge, we shouldn't judge. But that is part of our everyday life. We are making judgments all the time. And if we are aware of the fact that we need to make judgments righteously, I think that's to me that comes across with those scriptures. Judge not ye unrighteously. And so how do we judge righteously? By trying to see everybody as the Lord sees them, as a child.
Yeah. I think too, I remember the scripture, judge others like you want to be judged, so I don't know, that might help with some of the biases, but I don't think there's any way to ever get rid of them completely.
Unless you were to do like a blind, like one of the questions in there was, do you think that the way that audits are done needs to be changed? I think that there needs to be, like in our judging, especially I do college also, and for our college meets, the colleges that we go and judge for have nothing to say about what judge comes anymore. Used to be, if that the colleges would hire you, and so there was a tendency to give the host club or the host university the better scores, because then they would hire you to come back again. And about 8 years ago, they changed the system so that it all goes through this assigning system. And there are assigners that are not affiliated with any of the universities, and they have the job of assigning the judges. So even though the colleges are actually the ones that pay us, they are not the ones that get to choose who comes and does their meets. And so I think that might be, a way to fix part of the bias problem. Is, I mean, if you have a brain in your head, obviously you're going to err to the side of who's writing your check. And if that doesn't, if your employment doesn't depend on them, saying, yes, we want them back, or no, we don't. If it's just some unbiased assigning, thing that, you know, sends out the next person, then that really takes the incentive away from trying to please who's writing your check to doing what you think is, you know, right.
So I started. I'm sorry, I was just listening and typing while y'all were talking. So I just put, it's hard to be, or it's hard to overcome biases because we have our own predetermined ideas about situations or a person. At times we know that we're going to be biased. At times that we know we're going to be biased, we tend to be harder on the situation because we're familiar with it. For example, judging a family member in a gymnastics contest, instead of being impartial, you might judge them harder to avoid being accused of bias.
True.
So,
okay, that sounds good.
Cool.
And I like your example of how to overcome it, you know, by not, you know, getting your employment check or allowing the person to choose who comes to do the audit. If it's random, that's...
Yeah, and that's what it is it's random. And I think that the same type of thing could be done with auditing. You know, all of the auditors that are available put in their availability, and then the companies that need to be audited, you know, put in what they need, and then somebody that's unbiased, that's neutral, that's the word. Somebody that's neutral puts those two together. So the company is still the one that's paying that auditor, but they don't have any say about who comes in the next time.
Right. It's a great idea. I wish they did that over here in our high school sports.
Well, it's hard, and you know, we don't do that in our club gymnastics. Not really. But yeah, it was a big problem in NC2A gymnastics, and I think it is in other NC2A sports, and that's one of the reasons that they decided to go this way. And it also gives those of us who haven't been judging college gymnastics for 40 years an opportunity to go and judge some of the, you know, bigger schools. And also then you don't have the same, I mean, once you've seen a team, you now have something to compare what you see again. And as we go and do different things, different club or different universities, we get a larger variety of experiences to pull from when we're making our judgments. And I think that's really important, that the, you know, people in the SEC get out of the SEC, and the people that live in the Pac-12 area get to the SEC, and then you can combine the information that you get from both of those places, and you make more knowledgeable judgments, I think.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about like maybe like going over the rules and reminding like judges and stuff like that, you know, that they should be, you know, impartial and
we do that. I mean, before every meet, that right. There's, like I said, the meet referee is kind of the one that's in charge of the judges for the meet, and we have a meeting before the meet, and she goes over all of that. Remember not to judge what you've seen in the past, judge what you see today,
right?
You know, not what you've seen on YouTube or, you know, TV. And remember that, you know, don't judge the leotard, don't judge, you know. And yeah, we go through all of that, but and we hear it every single time we go. And yet there are still, I mean, and that's one of the hard things about gymnastics judging, is that you have your own particular style that you appreciate more than others sometimes, and you even have to take that out of it and say, even though I don't appreciate all this hip hop dancing, they still performed it excellently, and so I can't say, well, I'm going to give you a lower score because I don't like that. You have to give them the score that they earned, which is
Right.
if they did a great job, then they get a great score.
Yeah. I think the NFL also did stuff to help with the bias, with having like the playback where they can go and review it so they can actually all see it, I think that helps too.
Yeah. But it's so hard to, I don't think people sometimes realize, like in the, football, is it a foul? Is it not? It's a split second thing.
Right.
And you have to, as an educated official, you have to be willing to make the call and then suck it up if the call was wrong.
True.
So I added on to this paragraph D&C 11, 12, and now verily, verily, I say unto thee, put your trust in the Spirit, which leadeth to do good, yea, to do justly, to walk humbly, and to judge righteously, and this is my spirit.
Oh, I like that, Alex. That is really good.
That is.
Okay. Are you guys good with that, or do you want to add more to that?
Should we read Jeremy's example?
Oh yeah, you're right.
That way he can get credit for our meeting since he contributed.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. So he did a familiarity example. So he said, David is looking to purchase a car. He goes to Jay's dealership and looks at the car that he has interest in. He selects a nice Ford and takes it on a test drive. David really likes the car. He goes back to the dealership and tells the salesman he's interested in the car, but he wants to take it to a mechanic first to make sure that there isn't anything wrong with it. The salesman asserts that their mechanics have looked over the car and ensured nothing is wrong with it, but agrees that David can take it to a mechanic shop to check it out. David takes the car to the shop and little does he know that,
Bless you.
Thank you. That John, the mechanic, is best friends with the owner of Jay's dealership. John does his inspection and finds that the car will need a new transmission. He knows if he tells David that the dealership will lose out on a sale, the dealership spends a lot of cars to John, so John doesn't want to lose their business. John tells that the car is great and will last many miles. This particular example has to do with familiarity because John is familiar with the dealership and wants to help them get a sale because of all the business they send him. He doesn't know David and has no reason to be loyal to him whatsoever. There's Jeremy's example.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I'm going to save this paragraph in here. Group 2, listen 8. All right. Cool, guys.
Okay.
All right. Well, see you next week.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Sounds good.
Okay. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.